This is George Dionne of KNAC.com, and I'm here with Sevendust guitarist John Connolly to talk about his side project, Projected. If I knew absolutely nothing about Projected, how would you describe the band's music to me?
Um, that's a tough one. Hard rock, I mean, is sort of like a catch-all, but I don't know. I mean, we've kind of tiptoed around a couple different things. I mean, you know, sort of active rock, but I don't even know what active rock is anymore, to be quite honest with you. Um, we're not afraid to go metal, and we're not afraid to go full programming and electronic and stuff like that. So we sit in that sweet spot in the middle, which is just generally rock. But yeah, we'll metal it up every now and again. So that's not very active rock.
Well,
It's not these days.
the members of Projected are from Tremonti and Alter Bridge and Sevendust, but they don't sound like any of those bands. So that's one thing you got going for you.
Good. Although every now and again, it's funny. Like Mark will write a song, and everyone's like, "Oh, I swear I could hear Mark Tremonti singing that song." And I'm like, "No, but he wrote it, so naturally you're going to have those things that happen." But yeah, I mean, we kind of wear our influences on our sleeve in this band, and the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So, if someone accuses us of sounding like Sevendust or Alter Bridge occasionally, it kind of comes with the turf, as long as they're like, oh, it sounds exactly the same, but I think it's different enough, and it kind of fills a space within that color palette. Because I mean, you got Sevendust, Miles, which with Miles you've got Slash, even all the way up to Guns N' Roses, I guess technically. And then you've got the Alter Bridge Tremonti thing, which goes all the way back to Creed, and then Sevendust, and Jean's got a solo thing going. Clint's had solo record. He's done Call Me No One with Morgan. Morgan released a solo EP. So this camp is not afraid to kind of step out and go, hey man, you want to go make some music together? So the side project is sort of like a normal thing for everybody here.
Projected's been putting out albums since 2011-ish. How did you guys all get together? Was it just born out of you guys were touring together and you're like, hey, let's put a band together?
Drinking. I mean, I can blame a lot of late night sitting on the patio, solving all the problems in the world, and then realizing we can't solve any of these problems. But you know what? We should probably get in the studio and make some music together. Kind of one of those things. I think when the idea first originated, it was more of a not if it was going to happen, but just when. Where was the schedule gonna allow that window? And an interesting thing happened when we finished. I think it was Cold Day Memory. We finished that tour. We realized we needed to take a break for a minute, and not so much for us, but like our fans sort of needed a break. Like we'd been burning it hard for year in, year out, and it's always kind of cool when we step away for a while. And when we say we're going to take a break, that means like 6 months. I mean, for our fans, it seems like it could be an eternity, but 6 months really isn't that long. But it's long enough where it's like, okay, here's my opportunity. Here's a window. And there's always songs that, you feel really strongly about that the guys in your band just don't. It's like, that's sort of the part of the process of, making music and creating is, you can create great stuff, but it has to fit that space, and it has to fit those personalities. And there's just a lot of stuff that we all write that is really, really good stuff, but it has no business being on a Sevendust record. And I'm the first to admit it. I'll walk in with the guys and be like, yeah, this really doesn't belong. And sometimes I'll be like, I don't know, it could be really cool. It'd be like completely a different vibe or a different thing. But, I think with the creative process with this band, it's a little, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, we don't process it nearly as much as we would in the other bands. I think we sort of go more off instinct. And then, having a producer to sit there and tell you whether you're an idiot or not always helps. This is the first time that we actually had him there for that part of the process. So, but yeah, man, I mean, the support that we have among all of the different bands within the group has always been something that's been really, really cool. But it's hard when you sit there and you go, we've been doing this for 10 years. We've done 3 records. Like, we literally started back in 2012 with nothing, and just, born out of those, we should do this at some point in time. And when we finally got a chance to do it, it was kind of like, I think at first we did it, and then we were just like, let's just see if we can just make a record that doesn't sound like absolute garbage. You know what I mean? It was like, let's just see if we could put this together on a dime, no money, all on the inbox in my home office studio, and then give it to Elvis and have him mix it and shine the turd, so to speak, and it was kind of one of those experiments that I think we looked back and went, okay, wait a minute. This was a way cooler experiment than we thought that was going to happen. And it was just born out of that, just born out of, okay, Alter Bridge isn't doing anything right now, and Sevendust is getting ready to hop in the studio. Let's make some music, and we finally did it. It finally came to fruition. I remember when I called up Scott, I was like, hey, remember that thing that we always talked about? He was like, yeah. And I was like, well, I got a bunch of tunes. So I sent him over, a bunch of the demos, and that was it. We were off and running. And we didn't even have a band. It was literally me and him that were going to go in and do it. Vinny was an obvious choice because I knew his schedule, and we'd sort of always, he was like, hey man, if you ever need help doing anything else. And it was like, okay, well, this is a no-brainer. And then the E-Rock thing just happened by accident. We were over at Mark Tremonti's house listening to the demos, and he walked in and he was like, hey man, what's that? I was like, it's this thing that we're going to take into the studio. He was like, I want to get in on that. And I was like, well, okay. And then like 3 weeks later, he showed up, and, we started hammering parts and stuff. And I mean, it was literally that organic. It was just sort of like, okay, the band just sort of happened. So, in some ways, it's crazy when you sit there and you think about it, and you're like, okay, this sort of came out of just, let's just go do something and see if it sticks. And 10 years later, here we are.
Here we are talking about the third album, which is Hypoxia. It came out on June 24th, last Friday, on Rat Pack Records. You describe this album as kind of taking on the theme of social suffocation.
Quite a bit, yeah. I mean, it was one of those weird things. It's like, when the pandemic first happened, everyone was sort of like, all right, this is sort of cool, maybe. I mean, I don't know. It's like, you sort of get tired of being in the house, and then you do a bunch of like Zoom conference calls with your friends. We'd have happy hour and kind of catch up since we couldn't see each other and stuff. And then you get like 2 or 3 months in, and it's like, you almost feel like you have a front row seat to the end of the world. You're watching it unravel right in front of you. And mostly on the social medias. I mean, it was just crazy. And I got it. It was like, you lock everyone in the house, you stick the kids downstairs each on a different computer, trying to get school done while you're trying to get work done. You can't do everything. And people get frustrated. They're not going to lash out at their kids. They're going to go on Facebook and, you idiot, let me block this person and delete them and ban them. And, it was just sort of like a systematic thing. And I mean, it was all sort of new rules with the pandemic. Nobody really knew how long it was going to take, when, I mean, it was like, it just question mark after question mark after question mark after year after year. And then you're like, oh man, this is how humanity, completely dismembers itself, all on Facebook, or all on, Instagram. TikTok was sort of a breath of fresh air, because it was at least something for the kids to sort of like, all right, they're making videos at home, everyone's dancing, you got dogs in the mix, cats in the mix. And then you go over to Twitter, and, it's just a fist fight. So, it was like, oh man, I mean, it's like, it was so much of it that was happening. It was like, I even caught myself, and there's so many times where I'd be like, I'd type and be like, you know what, delete, backspace. And I would backspace and go, that took 13 seconds. I just saved myself 7 hours of back and forth about nothing. It's like, at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is like, okay, oh, we're fighting over, is the vaccine going to work? Is it not going to work? Is this, it's like, all right, this is science kind of happening in real time, and everyone should probably just step back and listen for a second and try to keep an open mind. But no one wants to do that when they're locked in their house for 4 months during the summer. You finally hit August, and like, at least down here in Florida, they were encouraging everybody to get out. And I was like, thank God. Like, as soon as, I'm on the bike and I'm riding by myself and I'm out, I'm in the sunshine, or, we actually would go down to the beach as a family and just, stay away from each other, just, public. And then they shut all that down. It was like, oh man, like you can't do anything. So I totally get it, and for me, thankfully, I was in a creative, writing process. So I was more of the observer. But, I mean, in all honesty, it's like, it's easy to get sucked into that stuff. It really is. You don't realize you're in it until all of a sudden, 3 days later, you're going, wait a minute. Your family's going, can you get off the phone or the computer like for 5 minutes? Can we go watch a movie, or something like that? But yeah, I mean, I think the way that I kind of tend to look at songwriting is, instead of sitting down and going, okay, here's a whole list of stuff I want to talk about, I always sort of take the world as it comes, and whatever's happening at that point in time is usually what I'm going to talk about. I'll usually put my own personal, twist on it, where I sit with a lot of the stuff. But, sometimes I leave it just more of a general thing, just because the generalities are, everyone can feel them. Everyone knows it. When I told everyone what Hypoxia was about, and half of them were like, oh God, you're probably talking about me, right? I'm like, no, I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about just a systematic, everyone freaked out. They all snapped and lost their minds over the same 4 to 6 month period, and it was like the perfect storm of, in hindsight, we all know why it happened. A lot of alcohol, a lot of pack everyone in, a lot of, can't get away from the kids, can't get away from the house, can't get away from your, you got to do this, or if you work at Publix, okay, well, you got to go to work every day. If you don't work at, I'm sitting there feeling bad going, I got to go get some food. And these people are like, they never got a break. They never got a day off. Right. You look at everyone who is deemed essential, and it's like, there was just a whole lot of this country that really it was a completely different experience during the pandemic. I talked to some of these people that are like, we never had a day off. Like literally all you people were freaking out on social media. We get home, it's like nobody's friends with anyone anymore. And in the meantime, we're just plugging along, packing groceries, stocking shelves. We're driving trucks to get your stuff to you. So it's like, yeah, I mean, I think we'll look back on 2020 and go, wow, let's not do that again. If at all possible.
I hope so. You got a couple songs co-written with Morgan Rose from Sevendust. Were these songs that were originally intended for Sevendust and just didn't make the cut?
One of them was Deadweight, was definitely one of those. The interesting thing is Negatives. Well, I'm calling this my demo names. It's so funny. The Thing That Is Real was a demo as well. Now the difference with that one is we didn't keep any of the vocal ideas or anything that were, we flew some things up the flagpole in the Sevendust world and they just didn't work. But it's sort of the nature of the process more than it's the nature of the song. That was the first piece of music. When we start writing a Sevendust record, we have, this record, there's probably, I don't know, realistically, there's probably 40 or 50 good music ideas. And then we whittle those down to like 20. And then we really hone in on the dozen that are like going to make the record. You have to start somewhere. And The Thing That's Real was the first piece of music that literally we started. And I kind of regret doing it because I'm like, the first piece of music is always Sacrificial Lamb. That's always your warm-up tune anyways. You're excited about being there and everyone's like, yeah, it's the best thing we've ever heard, and then 2 days later, you're like, I don't think so. It's like, it just didn't work. Deadweight was one that we actually had started working with LJ. We started, singing. And to be quite honest with you, it felt a little metal to me. And I took it home and I remember I sang the exact same part and I went, wait a minute. And I was like, Morgan, are you going to be, is it going to bother you if that one, he goes, no, man. He goes, that one's sort of like an outlier if we really wanted to go and do like a Splinter thing or something like that. But yeah, that was the one song that I looked at and went, okay, let's make a decision right here, right now, further down the path, or do we just pull it back and just say that's going to be a projected song? And he was totally cool with it. He was like, do whatever you want, and you want to rewrite it. I was like, nope. The only thing that I did was I spent a little bit of time with the verses, but yeah, the pre's and the chorus was all Morgan. And I loved it. It was fun to sing. It was a challenge to put the parts together because sometimes when you're the singer, guitar player, you find the pieces of the puzzle that work. And that was one of the ones that I was like, oh, wait a minute, different dude wrote it. So it took me a minute to get it in my hands, but it's just super fun to play, he co-wrote on that one. Like I said, The Thing That's Real was a piece of music that was explored, and it just didn't get that far. But it's interesting because most of the stuff that I have, most of this, like the bigger songs on a lot of these records, they're always things that we had visited at some point or another in the world of Sevendust. And sometimes it was just, it just wasn't going to fit at all. Sometimes it was just whatever the vocal idea that was sitting over the top of the piece of music just wasn't working. And then sometimes it was literally, we got 20 pieces of music and we're not going to put 20 songs on a record, even though I did and projected, did a double record. But yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of these pieces of music, they all get the opportunity to go one way or the other. And it's interesting because Lejean has such a different vocal style. I mean, he's all R&B and soul, and he's such a talented singer. But sometimes when I do the parts that suit my voice the best and hand them to him, it almost dumbs him down too much. You know what I mean? Like we're sort of, I almost feel like I'm holding the reins by leaving that kind of a part. I'm like, you're better than that. So we need to give you something that is better than that. And that's usually what a lot of these things, a lot of the stuff, even in the process now, I mean, it happens on every record. But I just finished a writing session with Sevendust, and the guys, in typical fashion, went after a whole bunch of music that I wasn't expecting them to go after. I wrote a bunch of weird stuff just in case this time around, and then I wrote a whole bunch of like traditional, this sounds like Sevendust stuff. And they only grabbed one or two of those. They grabbed all the weird stuff. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. This, I was like, I got tons of this. I opened up folders of like, yes, more of that. Yeah. So in hindsight, I go, okay, I've got 3 or 4 that I already sang on that I know that I'm going to do something with. So they're going to be projected songs, and we kind of looked at each other in the process. Clint, I think, looked at me on one. He was like, that sounds really good with you singing. And I was like, it probably should go on the projected pile. So as we go through the process, we're better. Even Sevendust is better at telling me which songs, sometimes they're like, man, we really should have done that song, and sometimes it's just, the thing that sucks about some of these demos for me, I mean, it happens in the studio. It happens when you're sitting there and you're living it day in, day out. You've got all the songs on the record, and there's always those 2 or 3 songs that you're just like, all right, let's just get this done because they're not my favorites. They've obviously shown up to be the weaker ones at whatever, for whatever reason. And you sort of just want to get them done because it's like, okay, they're here for a reason. And then sure enough, Elvis will dig the screws in, and something happens in the process of pulling the mix together that it's just like all of a sudden it becomes one of your favorites, and it's like, but that's the beauty of making records. Sometimes right away, like if you write Happy Birthday, you probably know it's pretty good. You know what I mean? When you write that undeniable, okay, people are really, really, really going to dig that. It's a hook. But then there's other times where it's like, it's the struggle, and, all of a sudden, just about when you're ready to hit the delete button, anytime that I'm ready to delete something, I send it to Mark Tremonti and he writes, Watch It Burn, My Addiction. You know what I mean? Like he's always the guy who can get me out of that little spot. Cause I'm like, E-Rock's like, please don't ever delete anything, man. He's like, just don't do it. And I'm like, I wouldn't really do it, but I've come close.
This is the first time Projected has worked in a studio, and you mentioned you worked with producer Michael Elvis Basquette. Tell me a little bit about being able to kind of record the classic way with a producer that you said calls you an asshole and puts a shine on a turd.
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about it was not to keep dwelling on the pandemic stuff, but I think the pandemic, there was a lot of negatives for sure, but this was one of the positives. I was in demo mode, and I was in sort of like mid to late demo mode. Like I really kind of had my handle on what the core of the record was. Maybe 3/4 of the way cooked, still a good way to go, but I could tell what the record was going to be. And, pandemic happened. We did Shiprocked, got on the boat. They declared it a pandemic, got off the boat. Half the boat was sick, and the whole world, shut down over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I was still in that mode. So I just stayed in writing mode, and figured, all right, well, if I'm not going to be touring, at least I can finish this out. And then I started thinking, I was like, well, you know, we could probably get in the studio sooner than later. I was thinking August. Elvis needed a favor. He was like, how about June? And I was like, June's in 3 weeks. Like, holy crap, you know? And Tim was like, well, can you get it wrapped up? And I was like, yeah. I was like, if we're all going to the studio together 3 weeks, 100% I can get it done. So I kind of didn't touch a guitar for like 2 weeks. I had a bit of a panic attack because when I finally did, it was like, oh, it was all weird. It was like I couldn't fret a chord correctly. Oh my God, you know, I don't remember how to play guitar. 2 or 3 days of that, you know, kind of getting your stuff back in shape. But yeah, it was that. And then hop in the studio, and we hopped in the studio together for the first time ever. I mean, it was crazy, you know, it's like everybody was in the same place at the same time. Like, and we've done a couple photo shoots. You know, we did a show, but it's very rare when we can get all the bodies, you know, in the same house, much less a studio. And then we just acted like a regular band does, you know, we just tracked a record the way most bands do, which was a cool experience because I love doing the other stuff. I think the challenge of doing it on hard drives and hotel rooms and, you know, over the period of a year, it's cool. To be able to see that you can actually pull it together. But I much prefer the experience of going in and diving in all together at the same time. I think it just has a connectedness, a cohesiveness that just, it doesn't exist when you have a disconnected vibe. You know, if the whole vibe of the record is disconnected, there's going to be a certain amount of that in it, and it's unavoidable. Where I think if you go in the studio, the opposite happens. You know, you have so many common things that are going to be going through the entire recording process. You know, he doesn't have to look at, you know, did you use a DI every time you did the bass? Is it the same bass every time? You know, the same guitar every time? Or did you use a plug-in here? Did you use an amp here? You know, there were a lot of question marks and a lot of, okay, I'm just going to be an artist, so I'm going to grab whatever you gave me and make it not sound terrible. You know, and then sometimes it was like, oh, this is cool. How'd you get that? I'm like, I don't know. I'm terrible about that stuff. Like when I map it into the computer, and I don't write down how I came by it. So, you know, I've gotten a little better about putting those little notes in there, you know, giving them a roadmap and stuff. But it was such a different process because normally when it comes time to like get it together and pull the record together, it's like 2 weeks of just going through files and hard drives and pulling this and importing that and deleting that and getting that over there, doing, you know, all the stuff that's like completely non-artistic whatsoever. The stuff that literally will burn you out if you have to do too much of it. And I experienced that, you know, it's like, oh, I can edit my own vocals, I can do this. And, you know, you do it. And then you're like, okay, I don't have any energy left to do anything else whatsoever. I understand why these guys get paid as much as they do. So yeah, I mean, going to the studio and having Elvis and Jeff and just the whole experience was just, it felt right. You know, it felt good because there's never a question, you know, if there's a discussion about a part, you discuss, everyone checks the box, you move on. That's it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to stress over, I need to call them because we got to talk about the fact that this thing is not going to be on there anymore. It's never any weirdness. You know, it's always, oh yeah, that's much cooler. Let's do that instead. You know, and that's the beauty of when you're face to face and you're having those creative moments. You know, I mean, we're all artists and we're sort of collaborating in the moment. You know, a lot of times there'll be like B sections in demos and stuff like that. And I'm super, you know, I tell Elvis and E-Rock, I'm like, these are all just placeholders. Please explore the space. You know what the frame is. I'm just saying something needs to happen here. If that's it, great. But if you guys want to go on a 30-minute deep dive and try to really come up with something, and they did. And that was what the whole record was, sort of an exercise. It was like, okay, this is cool, but is it the coolest thing we could do? I don't know. We got time. We can't come out of the house. You know, we're looking on CNN, 17,000 cases in Florida. We were like, we're not ever coming out of the house. You know? I was like, I'm staying in here for the next 3 months. I mean, that was the other beautiful thing was that was sort of the time where like all the Uber Eats and everything, they were doing they just dropped the bag off. You know, you see them show up on the security camera, boom, it was all taped up, go in there, spray it down, Lysol everywhere. You know, I mean, we didn't know what we were doing, but we were making good music.
That's right. With everybody involved in other bands, has there ever been an opportunity for Projected to play a live show?
Not until now. Sevendust is going to have a bit of a break. Like I said, we did that 6-month thing before. We're going to do one that's kind of like that. I think we're going to shut it down. We've got one more run that goes from, I think it's around the Blue Ridge Rock Festival up to Louder Than Life. So it's mostly September. I think it may just tiptoe into October, the very beginning. But from that point until around April, I don't think we're really going to do much. There's, always a chance that someone's going to offer us something to do a New Year's play or whatever, but that would only be like 3 shows. So we'd probably be, our opportunity is coming. Bad thing for Scott Phillips is he's got an Alter Bridge record going too. So it looks like he might be doing double duty first. Or if he doesn't do double duty, he's at least going to be going from that to something else kind of quick, but he's down with it, man. He wants to do it so bad. But yeah, I mean, this is a bunch of different things have happened since 2017. Main thing, we went in the studio and did a record with a producer like most bands do. And then the second thing was our manager now is also Alter Bridge and Tremonti and Sevendust managers. So his eyes on the ball a lot better than mine was. I'm not really good at multitasking the 2 bands at the same time because once Sevendust, like when we're in Sevendust writing mode, I'm like, oh my God, I'm launching a record right now, and the guys are all helping me. They're all, reposting and stuff. I'm like, all right, this is cool, but back to business. We, because we're gonna be in the studio in like 2.5 weeks. So it's good having Tim on board because Tim is like, he sees all the pieces of the puzzle all at the same time. And he's hit me up going, why haven't we toured this before? And I'm like, gotta find the window. And someone's probably going to be doing double duty, whether it be us playing with Sevendust or us playing with Tremonti or us playing with Alter Bridge. Someone's going to have to do it. And if you can get something that isn't with any of those bands, that's a bonus too. You just have to sidestep all the rest of the schedules. Make sure Alter Bridge or Sevendust or Tremonti aren't doing something. It's like, the Tremonti Alter Bridge thing is sort of like this. It's like, I don't think Mark ever really stops. He's got the Sinatra thing now too. And I'm like, he's busy. He's super busy. So yeah, I mean, I think for the first time, we've always hoped, but we never really saw an opportunity. So at this point, it's like, okay, if nothing's happening, then let's pick a few moments that would be cool to get out there.
You mentioned that Sevendust is talking about a break after the fall, and you guys are actually going into the studio over the summer. I read something that said you guys are sort of considering retirement.
It's funny. I mean, anytime that we talk about this stuff, people are like, oh, that's it, they're quitting, it's the end. It's really not that at all. It's more of a, I mean, we're realists. We ask ourselves, are we going to be jumping off trampolines and drum risers and stuff when we're 80? Like, are we going to want to do 300 shows a year when we're 80? Probably not. But I look at a band like the Stones and I go, but you can still go out and do something whenever you want to do it. So that's sort of what I think what we're doing is we're looking at the, making records at some point in time, making records and doing a big tour to support the record. I don't think it's going to be something that we're going to want to do like we're doing it now. I think we'll always make music in some way, shape, form or another, even if it's small doses. And I think we'll always tour in small doses, pick and choose those moments, not grind it out, do it enough where we're like really, really, it just keeps you wanting to do it. It's like, as you get older, the family time starts to weigh down on the scale, as it should. And we've all got families and we've all got kids of different ages, going through, different points, some in elementary school, some getting ready to go to college, some driving, which is crazy. But yeah, it's like there's more to life. And I think we've all appreciated the fact that we want to nurture Sevendust to the point where we could perpetually do it forever. But you're not going to see us 3 times coming through New York City on a tour. If we come through once, okay, but yeah, I mean, you got to look at the age thing. You got to look at the motivation. You got to look at the family thing. You got to look at all of it and weigh it out. And instead of saying, oh, that's it, we're wrapping it up, we're just saying, I think we're going to move into something different. We're just going to move into a different model. And yeah, I mean, at some point in time, it's like, okay, officially we're gonna, I mean, you know, it's funny because it's like, okay, how many bands have said that they're gonna retire from touring, and then all of a sudden, that'll be us. I mean, we could come in and say there's not a chance that we're gonna play another show. We hate each other, and 2 years later, we're gonna be back out there going, you know what, man, we really did, probably shouldn't have, reacted so quickly. We're down. We're gonna do it again. I mean, Motley, they had contracts and they're out doing a stadium tour, and I'm like, they should. You know what I mean? If you want to play, and that's sort of what we're gonna do. I think we're just going to move from the point of like having to do it and having that be like something that people have expectations on. And that'll be when we're done, making, I mean, the thing about it is when like to make a full length record these days, I know people are into it, but people just want music. Like they don't really care whether they get 10 songs every 2 years or whether they get a song or two every month, 2 months. Which I think would be a more interesting model to go down anyways, because you can just, as you create, you'll know your moments. There's always going to be those 2 or 3 songs that are like, oh, wow, I can't wait to play this for the guys. And then you go, well, let's go hop in the studio for 2 days. Let's go sit with Elvis for 2 days, punch 2 or 3 songs out, stick them in the can, and then do that 2 or 3 times. And then if you want to release a record, release a record. If not, I mean, EPs are super popular right now. I mean, Spirit Box just dropped a 3-song. I actually enjoyed that. I was like, it reminded me of Garbage. I was like, this is awesome. And it totally unexpected, but those kind of moves are the moves that I think are going to keep the business. I think it's going to keep fans engaged because you're not giving them the playbook going, okay, on this date, here's the EPK, here's the bio. We've done it the traditional way. Sometimes that whole, let's just drop it. Let's go record it and just drop it. Drop the video, drop whatever. So that I think is more interesting to all of us as we get a little older, but just any way that we can kind of keep it fresh. I mean, we're in a really good headspace in the Sevendust world and in the projected world. It's just like, I think it's just being thankful for the fact that we're back to all of like, I got to do a lot of one thing that I do for a living, a bunch. And I'm sort of tired of writing. Like I wrote for 2 years straight. Now I'm ready to actually take it back out on tour for a little bit, as we're talking about, I don't know, we need to wind the touring down. All of us are like, yeah, I can't wait to get back out on the road. You see how it goes. It's like, we're going to miss it. So that's why we're not saying never, but we are saying at some point it's going to get different. So y'all don't be thinking you're going to take a 3-week vacation and follow Sevendust around on tour. You might take a week and follow us on tour, but I don't know if the 3 weeks is going to be necessary anymore.
Fair enough. That's all I got for you today, John. I appreciate you coming on KNAC.com. The new album by Projected is Hypoxia. It's out now on Rat Pack Records. Fantastic album. Great job.
Thank you very much, man. Really appreciate it.